general questions, just the Warcraft 3 runner. So this is something that, regardless of whether you're in games or not, this is pretty true in any part of life. If you have some staff that's reporting to you, for example, there's only so many times you can do the same thing and give them the same reward. So a pretty good example, recently my own company, Razor, we had a annual appraisal thing where everybody goes through this process and you tell them how they're doing. Are they doing a good job or are they doing a poor job? And I had a pretty difficult employee at the time. He was a very talented guy. And he was an industrial designer from Europe. He was making quite a lot of money, and I wanted to give him a little bit of a perk for saying, hey, you've been doing a great job. And for most of the people, it's, I just give him a raise or give him a bonus or something like that. And this guy was already kind of that part of the salary scale where unless you really, really, really give him a big raise, there's a very small diminishing marginal return on, here's $500 a month or something like that. So in his case, we just threw him a nice big dinner party, and he kind of got the recognition that he was looking for as an industrial designer. So the same is very much true in game design. Let me actually hop back to this. So all three of these reward mechanics are notoriously poor at scaling. Let's take this one as an example. This was actually a very fun game, and it cost me several nights sleep last night when I started playing it. It's a Singapore game. It's a puzzle connect 3 mechanic type game where you have different colored gems and you're supposed to connect them in order. Each level you would, the whole theme was Asian fashion, as you can see. So each level you would unlock a new piece of clothing. I believe it was a hairstyle, a shirt, and a dress. And based on what combination of, excuse me, just try this for a second. So based on what combination you wore, you had different abilities in the game that helped you. You could clear the whole field, you could blow up several squares that weren't the right color. And as fun as this game was, this was actually one of the few areas where I found the game pretty weak. So every single time you beat a stage, you got one new piece of clothing, which was great the first 2 times. But there's only 10 permutations of power combinations of clothing. So you wind up getting different fashions with the exact same powers on it. And frankly, after about the 25th level, it was to the point where you finish the level, you click through the OK screen, ignore what you just got, and move on to the next one. And kind of the problem that they ran into, I think, is they didn't scale the reward mechanism. The player had gotten used to it. It had become a little bit stale after playing the game for so long. And of course, records and high scores are the same. As far as high scores go, very few people are actually capable of getting those. So they're not intrinsically that interesting. And personal records are great for a while also when you play, for example, Mario Kart on the Nintendo Wii. The first couple times, you do lap time where you unlock the ghost character from the Nintendo developers. It's really fantastic, but after a while, just doesn't scale very well to a long play experience. And of course, beating the game, we talked a little bit about the drawbacks of that also, which is that most people actually don't beat your game. So how that relates to this? This is a little bit of a personal experience I also had. I normally fed this cat dry food most of the time. And one day I was just being really nice and purring and stuff. Like, I'm going to really treat this cat to a nice reward. So I bought this really nice kind of, well, it was a different kind, but you get the point. Fancy Feast, wet cat food. The cat loved it. It was happy. I was happy. And the next day I wouldn't eat the dry food again. That was a bit of a problem, you see. So how well do your reward and motivation mechanics scale as the player invests more time in your game, moves up the skill curve, or progresses through the content? In the case of my cat, it didn't scale at all because I couldn't afford to buy a caviar after that as the next step. And as we just talked about, a score, linear, lockable content is pretty notoriously bad at this. And also in MMOs, if you guys have played those, there's what's called MU deflation or mudflation, which basically, as players progress through the more advanced content of your game that you're trying to create, you trivialize the earlier experience. So you wind up spending a disproportionate amount of time investing or developing the, say, the first 20 levels, which people ultimately spend 10% of their time playing because they all max out. And likewise, your items you design become useless after a while also. So I think that should be. So what I'm kind of proposing throughout this whole presentation also, is that people look a little bit further with the reward mechanisms and don't fall in the trap that I did with my cap, or that the fashion game did without scaling also. And I think one of the most interesting places to do that is really understand what motivates people when they're playing your game. Not just as a whole game experience, but really at any little given point in the game. So in the case of Team Fortress 2, it can be a whole different experience. There's all sorts of things you can do in the game, 9 different classes you can play. But until that guy kills you 5 times in a row, the person isn't really looking for a revenge motive. They're playing the game, trying to win, trying different classes, having fun. But once this guy really starts hammering at you, you're pretty pissed. So it gets to the point where this is a really fun reward mechanism when you finally get your revenge and you finally get back at the guy. And likewise, going back to some of these, I would say that sound design is something that a lot of designers think of as an afterthought. I mean, it's often outsourced in the industry for good reasons. But frankly, I think a lot of people that played this game, it's almost 10 years later now, will remember this more than anything. That feeling when you have 25 kills in a row and you're kicking everybody's butt in the map, everybody probably hates you, and you've got this deep voice telling you you're cool, basically. I mean, this is a very memorable thing. It's not a traditional reward mechanic either. You don't think of sound as, here's where we're going to really innovate. And again, I don't think a lot of companies pay a lot of attention also to, okay, I can only create X number of levels, X number of art assets, and I'm going to have to force my player to repeat these quite a number of times. So a lot of people try these very cheesy little tricks, like, okay, I'm going to color the same monster blue and then put it in the same exact dungeon, or change the layout slightly, or move it to the left or the right. But just rewarding them very quickly and incrementally actually makes this a pretty fun mechanic. I think most people that play World of Warcraft would actually say the first 60 levels are the most fun you'll have in the game. Even though the really complex content doesn't come until the end when you have 40 people rating something together. I think that's what else it. Any questions about this stuff specifically? I'll answer any other questions at the end.